Yeah, so I have something of a confession to make. Hello one, hello all. Welcome to Willis Greedia. Welcome to another edition of Savage Sinema. I come to you as always as Charles, otherwise known as Sipo. Yeah, I have some confessing to make. I don't know how I've gone this long without discussing the 2009 Friday the 13th remake, reboot, restoration, whatever you would like to call it. I've covered this movie within rankings and such, but I've managed to dodge discussing this in its own case. And probably for good reason. Because the fans of the franchise seem to have this in a low regard, and I always felt like that was a bit extreme. I would normally consider the 2009 Friday the 13th in the top half of the franchise. I've seen things put up against Friday the 13th 2009 as the worst thing to happen to the franchise. Yeah, that's exaggerating, I would think. And there are crimes that this movie is guilty of, but it certainly does a lot well and right in some cases. As I record this, we've gone 15 years without a new Friday the 13th movie. It's the longest we've gone without Friday the 13th films. And if you told me back in 2010 that the reaction to 2009's release would be enough to not get new films for a decade and a half, I probably would have kept my mouth shut, because there are far worse movies in the franchise that could have warranted a 10-year break, and 2009 is not one of them. With the success of 2003's Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, directed by none other than Marcus Nispel himself, Platinum Dunes sought Nispel to get the same approach with the same writers, Swift and Shannon, of Freddy vs. Jason, to try to strike it a second time. And just a quick note, over 80% of you watching this have not subscribed. Do me a favor and consider, especially if you would like to see content like this. On June 13th, 1980, a young Jason Voorhees witnesses his mother being beheaded by a camp counselor who is trying to escape Mrs. Voorhees' murderous rampage around Camp Crystal Lake. Approximately 30 years later, a group of vacationing friends, Wade, Richie, Mike, Whitney, and Amanda, arrive at the lake on a camping trip to find some marijuana that was planted in the woods. As Mike and Whitney examine the abandoned Crystal Lake camp, an adult Jason begins to kill the rest of the group one by one. This movie is not flawless. No Friday the 13th movie is flawless. I'm sorry, guys. They're fun. Don't get me wrong, they're fun. I have a lot of nostalgia for them, but they're very flawed. And we'll go over that. Here are some of the cons that still remain for me. The music suffers from late 90s, early 2000s screamification of horror. And this seems to happen every generation or so, a generation on, a generation off, where music is a big deal with horror. And then, like, Scream came out, and the music, I'm not going to say it didn't matter, but it was secondary to the movie itself, which, if you're going to be secondary to a movie, Scream is the right place to go for it. But in the reaction years after that, horror movies decided to not lean on the creepy sounds and the music for quite a while after that. And especially after the remakes of the 2000s came out, things like music were a thing that just got looked over. And Friday the 13th, 2009 is no different than that. There's nothing that I can tell you about this soundtrack other than the ported over, which is a Harry Manfredini thing. There's nothing about the score that I could really point out. The music is unnoteworthy. You may have heard of the Avengers franchise. Same thing. Bland music, pretty fun time, paint by numbers, cookie cutter. and to redo the franchise with this unnoteworthy electro metal thing. It's not Mick Gordon, that's for sure. Inverted cast. And by this, I mean the group of kids you see prior to the title screen and the people you're with for the rest of the movie. They should have been the other way around. I believe the prologue is very strong. I actually enjoyed the characters in the prologue much more than the film proper. There is something that kind of pays off with that dynamic, but it's not enough. You know, as much as people enjoy Eli Roth douchebag characters that you enjoy when they don't make it to the end, that isn't exactly the Friday the 13th model. It seems like they lean on caricatures of horror tropes. Pretty is certainly something I would say about all the characters. Every single male and female is like an Abercrombie and Fitch model, and it seems all the white ones seem to have some variation on Farrah Fawcett's hairdo. Something I talked about previously. The great stuff about the great Friday the 13th movies of the 80s is they had realistic characters. You know, slice of life America. Friday the 13th 2009 is frat boys and sorority girls. This is not America.
This is America.
Another note, they speed through the Pamela storyline. And if there's something that Friday the 13th can hang its hat on, the original that is the fact that they had a female villain, and it was kind of revolutionary for the time. As much as it's not that big a deal for a lot of people. Hello, Brian Lomax. It was back then, and the whodunit element with a woman doing all the dirty deeds was a bit surprising back then. If that was paper thin in the original, then what they do in the remake is just downright disrespectful. They're trying too much to have their cake and eat it too. They play on too many tropes, and they don't execute on proper fanfare. I don't know if you make Pamela the entire prologue, like if that makes me feel better, but catching up with her getting the business within 5 minutes, I don't know how I feel about that either. Younger me would certainly enjoy this more than older me does, but very attractive people showing their skin, for better or worse, leaning into the flesh trope with very attractive people. Not very Americana, but very Fappy the 13th. Friday the 13th, 2009 has attractive people showing a lot of skin, a lot. This is the most Fappy the 13th movie since New Beginning. The issue with the hits is far less about gore and is more about what the psychological damage it does to you is. The fact that Jason was trapping people with a literal bear trap and letting someone burn alive in a duffel bag, that's brutal. The thing that I don't hear much credit for is the machete through the floor. And I remember when I first watched it, the idea of get off the floor. That's kind of horrifying. That did a number on my head. Like, where are you supposed to go? If the floor is your enemy, what are you supposed to do? Get off the floor. How do you do that? Yeah, is there not very much Tom Savini magic in here? Of course, but they don't all have to be that. And do you want tits or hits? Because there's certainly tits in this. Anything you see prior to that title screen coming up is the most intense, the strongest pound for pound 20-minute stretch in any Friday the 13th movie. I remember that the theater crowd of a packed house, when Jason runs up to that girl and the title screen comes on, just gasps, just oohs and ahs, and you felt this energy, and it was such a big deal. And perhaps it's another reason why I think you got to swap the characters or the way that the story's being told, but there was no chance. I don't think the rest of the movie could have matched that prologue. This is an opinion I've had for a while now. The prologue in 2009 is stronger than 4 or 5 entire movies in the Friday franchise. We've only had 3 Friday the 13th movies in the 21st century. Friday the 13th, 2009 is the best thing going as far as the 21st century is concerned. And I would argue it's the best Friday the 13th movie in at least the last half of the franchise. Easily the best looking studio Friday the 13th entry. It's strange for as much as the Paramount era of Friday the 13th kind of just pumped and dumped new movie after new movie. Final chapter. Just kidding. We're going to have 8 more. It was Paranormal Activity before Paranormal Activity was. A yearly Friday the 13th was something that you banked on, no matter how much end was in the title. What this retelling does is try to make sense of the first 4 movies. Bless this movie's little heart for trying to make sense of underground tunnels and Jason was alive and just like really speeding through it. As I talk to you right now, Friday the 13th, 2009 is something that I would say is up there in my top 5 of the franchise. I could see myself preferring this movie over the original, especially at certain times. There's a lot of quality here, and we've looked over it a bit too much. Again, if you told me 15 years ago we wouldn't have a sequel to that movie, I don't know, I would have fought for this movie a bit more. You think about it, Part 7 got an immediate sequel. Part 8 got a little bit of a delayed sequel. Jason X was not the last thing. Friday 2009 was the last thing we've seen from studios. For as much as the Jason universe wants to ask us what we're looking for, my simple answer is this: a movie. We had 3 Halloween movies with a returning Jamie Lee Curtis. There are so many other things that can be blamed for us not having another Friday the 13th movie. And if you check fan films, there's plenty of good stuff out there. There's plenty of not good stuff out there, but people are doing it with far less money. So I think people with money can maybe avoid putting so much thought into the process and have some sort of hybrid of the Paramount model and the Platinum Dunes model and, get something out quick and maybe try to make sense of things, but have something out there. I mean, Halloween Ends is out there. That's the most recent slasher we've had. So what say you? How do you feel about Friday the 13th, 2009? Do I lose my Friday the 13th franchise card just to prove my worthiness in the Friday the 13th franchise? This is a little plushy Funko. I can tell you just by looking at that is the Freddy vs. Jason version of Jason, even though his head is that of zombie Jason. As much as I can't stand Michael Myers kids for talking about the different masks, I could probably tell you the different masks from each Friday the 13th movie. This ensemble with this head shouldn't be together. Let me know down below what you thought. A special shout out to my patrons. Again, if you enjoyed this video, click the thumbs up. I guess I should apologize to the Friday the 13th fandom for having such a controversial take. And I guess I've got to apologize to Cody Leach and Brian Lomax. I don't feel good at all.